All right, Antoine, we good?
We are good.
All right, so welcome everybody to the 973rd meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. I will now read the ethics statements. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearances of conflicts. Does any board member have any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. All right. Consideration, Jay, I guess that's over to you.
Yes, first item of business, Madam President, would be consideration of the July 2020 meeting minutes, which you all received last week. So they are teed up for your action.
I will make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second, Keith Vance.
So motion from Andy, a second from Keith to accept the minutes. Ashley, I'll turn it back over to you if there are any discussion on the minutes.
Any discussion there, folks? If not, do we want to take a vote, Jay?
You can certainly call for the vote.
All right. All in favor say aye. Let me just call up everybody by name. Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
Michelle?
Michelle, you're muted.
Yeah, Michelle. I saw her lips, though. She said aye.
I know. Yeah, we're liberating, Michelle.
I don't think we can go on that.
Again, you're muted. And Michelle, you unmuted and then remuted. Michelle's got fast twitch, I think.
You can give us a thumbs up for yes.
She's good.
Okay. Michelle is aye, and I'm aye as well. So the minutes carry.
Thanks, everybody. So, Madam President, next item on the agenda are COVID-19 related matters. And the first of these is Crystal was going to present this, but she's got a sick kid who brought home sickness to her, not COVID, but sickness to her. And so Ellen is going to start off with a discussion of a proposed modification to our pharmacy inspection policies and procedures. Oh, I guess Crystal is on.
Crystal, you on? Can y'all hear me?
I can hear
Hey,
you, Ellen.
Okay. Crystal, are you on?
I am on.
You saved her from Jay.
Did you want to take it or you going?
I can if you want me to. I just may have to cut out short.
Go girl, you begin and I can close it.
Okay. So as most of you guys know, we've paused our inspection program, and as Jay was probably mentioning before, we have kind of put together a policy to kind of help us with our backlog when we do resume field operations. And so our inspection, our proposed inspection policy is to push back all of our retail inspections, their due dates for 1 year, with the exception of any retail pharmacy that has had a case or a follow-up inspection or a corrective action plan, a sterile compounding inspection, or a newly permitted inspection. So that's kind of our proposal, is to kind of push those dates back to kind of help with our backlog, because from our queries we're running, it looks like we're going to be at least 300 inspections behind or past due by November, or when we resume field operations.
So board
that's
members,
kind of our proposal.
right? So board members, and you have this. It's on page 3 of your materials behind this agenda item. Obviously, what the Inspections and Investigations Department has done is try to again push by default inspection due dates out for a year, except for those where we think there is a particular public health and safety reason that it would not be on balance a good idea to necessarily push those out. And as Crystal went through, you can see that list there. Pharmacies performing sterile compounding services will prioritize those. Inspection, if there's a new investigation, and so we need an inspection key to that investigation, those will continue. If there was a corrective action plan or follow-up requirement necessitated by our prior inspection, we'll keep on top of those. So, and then some that were already past due before December, we're going to make sure we pick those up. And as Crystal said, any newly permitted pharmacy will continue to make sure they are inspected within 1 year of the permit's issuance. So that's the proposal. Wanted to be sure you guys had an opportunity to review that and ask any questions you want to ask. Ellen, did I leave anything out on that?
I think you covered it all. The exceptions is really what we're talking about. So asking for that 1 year push out for all the due dates for the inspections, and then those exceptions that Crystal mentioned.
Okay, Nixon has a question.
All right.
So the question is, what about an out-of-state pharmacy what about an in-state pharmacy who's applying for an out-of-state permit? Is the universal inspection program more or less taking care of that issue, or are there still in-state pharmacies who need an inspection to satisfy an out-of-state license requirement? And where are those in the inspection process?
So you're talking about an in-state North Carolina pharmacy that is seeking to be licensed like in Virginia for their out-of-state?
Yes,
right.
or
most states, Bill, have put those requirements on hold or are accepting the current inspection as valid through a certain amount of time that they're pushing forward.
Oh.
And so that's kind of how that is happening or being handled.
So you're not really honoring requests for a special inspection just for that purpose?
Correct. All
I
like
would
field,
expect you to. I just was curious.
Yeah. All field operation has been halted.
Yeah. Okay.
But Bill, we've had a few of those calls, and when they've come in, Crystal particularly has gotten on the phone with the right folks at the state into which someone is applying, and we've been able to work those out. The state boards we all recognize we're in the same boat here on this thing, so they've been great about working with us on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, Bill, just if it's an out-of-state pharmacy applying for a permit here in North Carolina, and it's a pharmacy, it's a brand new permit and we don't know anything about them, and we are still requiring that they have it. We are not waiving an inspection for a pharmacy we don't know anything about from out of state, but we can, just as other states are working with us, we'll work with other states on a case-by-case basis about how current those inspections are and the like.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Okay, Jay, I think maybe Missy's up next.
Well, let me just so we've got it for the record, it would be great if we could get a motion to revise the inspection schedule and policy as we have it here, so we can get that documented.
All right.
Just
So
so
it's like
this is
yeah.
during the COVID-19 issue, right?
Correct. And let me be clear about that. The push out for the year will be a push out. I mean, if the public health emergency ended tomorrow, which we of course know it won't, all these dates, all the existing dates are going to get pushed out a year. We'll go back and pick them up, but we're not just going to push them out little by little. This would be a 1 year move forward so that we'll have time to catch up. If God forbid we get a year from now and we're still in this, then we'll have to figure out if we need to do something different.
So let's see, Michelle had the first motion. I'll second it. All in favor? I'll just do a roll call here. Andy,
Ahoy.
Keith,
Yes.
Bill,
I'm in favor of it.
and Wallace.
Aye.
Okay, that covers us, Michelle and I. All, so it passes.
Very good. We will make those changes, and much credit to Crystal and her staff in the inspections department who went through a very thoughtful and thorough process to figure out a way to deal with this. And that would then bring up Missy Betts, Ashley, to share some licensing info with us.
Hi there. Can you all hear me and see me?
I can
Yes,
hear you.
ma'am.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
Okay. Well, if you pin me, maybe you can see me. um, so as you all know, Stacy Mason is the one who licenses pharmacists for, the licensing department. She does an excellent job. And for months, she's been giving Jay and I some data about how many exam candidates and reciprocity candidates that she's licensed weekly. And we wanted to, we were really, Jay and I definitely wanted to see that data because we wanted to see how the pandemic was going to affect the exam candidates, especially because that we were concerned about the testing and the testing centers being closed and all that. So she's given us weekly data totals, and I've organized them by monthly totals. And so this first graph here, you should see it under your tab, and so I only did it during the peak months, June, July, August, September. Those are the biggest months that she licenses exam candidates. And she's been keeping this data, for as long as she's been doing it. So it was easy for her to give it to us and to see the trends because she was interested in it herself. So as you can see, things went down a little bit, but, as a whole, every week there might have been a little bit of a blip, which you're not seeing here, but as a whole with the totals, we really haven't seen any issues with the exam candidates not being able to be licensed because of testing. And then the second graph is to show you just the totals of exam candidates for the years. And as you can see there too, 2020 September isn't even done with, and we're only 26 from how we were in 2019, a difference of 26. So, I think that there's not a cause for concern, and so we're really happy with how things have panned out.
I think to the extent you can extrapolate from any of these, this is exactly right. I think we're going to see, we already see a slightly higher number of initial licenses for September, and I bet that we will see a slightly higher number of initial licensees in October. So I suspect we're going to be, like Missy said, right on pace to where we were in 2019.
Which is really great news because we were worried if there were a lack of pharmacists, and doesn't seem to be so. And I'm happy to entertain any questions you guys have.
I would assume from this that the vast majority of these folks are first-time takers. Is that right?
Yeah, these are exam candidates. Mm-hmm.
And first time, Andy, we always see the bump up, and second time starts around January.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. What do we have? Do we have any numbers cumulatively? Not, but passage rate. Does passage rate look similar to previous, or do we not have that data?
Passage rate of the NAPLEX and the MPJE testing?
Yes.
I don't have that right here, but we definitely do take that data. So
we can get that, Andy, and bring it back at the October meeting.
Yeah, for sure.
Just wondering if, of course, it's hard to parse out what thing is affecting what, but you wonder if there would be a small decrease in passage rate because of the dynamics people are dealing with. And of course, there could be other factors as well, but just curious.
Yeah.
We'll get that and bring it back in October.
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Missy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Missy, and thanks to Stacy for diligently keeping track of all of this stuff.
Thank you.
Related to COVID too, Madam President, and all board members, I have in your materials, they're on page 5 of your materials in this tab, is our emergency services waiver. And as you all know, the board enacted this waiver back in April after the public health emergency was declared. And for purposes of the COVID, this waiver does 2 things. Let me skip to the second thing it does. The second thing it does is allow relocation of a permit within 10 miles of its existing location without the need for any sort of change or permit, just by noticing us at the board that that the pharmacy has done that. As you all certainly understand, that's something that is more applicable in a case of a natural disaster where somebody's flooded out or the like, and they need to move the pharmacy. And your waiver makes it very easy for pharmacies to do that and get back up and get running, and to perhaps most critically to ensure that they're square with the DEA on that location to get stuff. So that's really not, fortunately, it's really not been in play during the COVID crisis. But the first waiver there, as you all know, is the waiver allows an out-of-state pharmacist who is not licensed in North Carolina, or an out-of-state certified technician who is not registered here in North Carolina, to practice in North Carolina during the public health emergency without getting an out-of-state or without getting a North Carolina permit or registration. What I wanted to put before you all is whether I think it's time to at least consider whether we still need that waiver. As you all know, we've been using NABP Passport, which is proven to be exceptionally helpful throughout this crisis to do the vetting process of out-of-state folks and give us some comfort that those who are operating in North Carolina under this waiver are safe and competent to do that. The Passport program for the public health emergency is going to end on December 31st, 2020. And the principal reason for that is that the states who are using Passport are beginning, and a significant number of them have already said, we don't need it anymore. We've passed the crisis point here, and we don't need to continue with a waiver of licensure registration requirements. So the question that I thought it was time for you all to debate and probably decide is, do we need to continue the out-of-state waiver, license and registration waiver? And if not, what would be the ending date? Because obviously there may be people who are in North Carolina who are operating under this waiver, who, if we're going to end the waiver, need to be given some opportunity to get a license if they think they're going to need it. So one suggestion would be that you decide today that we're going to end that part of the waiver, but we'll end it effective December 31st, 2020, which would give anybody who does have a specific need for a license or registration 3 months, over 3 months to get that done, which is ample time to get it done. In terms of utilization, NABP did do a survey of Passport holders that indicated only about 35% of Passport holders nationally are actually using their Passport. They actually needed it to practice in another state, and for the most part, those are folks using it for remote operation. So that's background, maybe more than you want, less than you want, but I think that's sort of what's on the table. Is we're going to need to have an orderly wind down of the out-of-state license waiver. Is now the time to do that. Ashley, I'm sorry I took longer than I meant to on that.
No, you're fine. Does anybody have any questions or discussion about this?
As Jay was talking before he named the date, I was immediately thinking, December 31st made the most sense. So unless others think differently, I think ending at the end of the year it gives them plenty of time. It sounds like a reasonable thing to do.
Do we know how many that are operating under this, Jay?
Yeah, that's Keith. That's exactly the $64,000 question. There are. I'm trying to remember how many thousand.
3,500.
Yeah, it's 3,500 folks that are holding a passport for North Carolina. But that's not just for North Carolina. I mean, these are folks that have a passport and they've sort of applied to use the passport, and they can use that passport in any state that accepts it. So it's hard for us to know out of that 3,500 how many are actually using it in North Carolina. The only piece of data, like I say, was NABP asked everybody nationally who's holding one of these, are you actually using your passport? And nationally, the number was about 35%. Now, I don't know how extrapolatable that is and how that may apply to North Carolina versus others, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's roughly the same. But all of that is to say, Keith, I don't have a precise number on that. I can say I haven't gotten a lot of calls about it, and I'm not surprised. I'm relieved at that, because I think, obviously our concern was we could run into situations where the bulk of a pharmacy's personnel were infected with COVID, and the choice was, well, we don't have the bodies to put in the pharmacy, and so we may need to rush people in from out of state to do that. I certainly have no knowledge that, and again, thank God, no knowledge that that's something that's actually happened anywhere in North Carolina. Certainly there have been pharmacists and pharmacy technicians and other personnel who have been infected with COVID and had to take time off, but I'm unaware of anything other than very temporary closures because of that. So again, that's fairly elliptical, I know, Keith. I just don't have a precise number on that, but I don't think it's thousands by any means.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So I have a question. So the reason that you want to have a ending date for this is because we don't need it, or because we have the passport program?
No, I think we don't need it, in my opinion, anymore.
Okay.
But I feel like that we need to give a period of time for those individuals who may have a very specific need or desire to get a North Carolina license or registration, that they're going to have a 3-month lead time to get it done. Now, it happens that if we agree to do that and lift our waiver on effective December 31st, 2020, that would coincide with the passport thing. So we would land a lot of planes at the same time. But this is being based on lack of a need, in my opinion, to continue the waiver and a lead time for orderly wind down.
Well, what's the harm in just leaving it in place until the emergency is over?
We can do that. We would need to come up with a new system after December 31st, 2020 to do that. So we would have some significant time and effort investment here to build out a vetting system. The birds have gotten loose. Bill, you went back on mute, so I don't know if you.
Yeah, I was muting the dumb bird clock. So, so why is the passport program sunsetting it on December 31st?
Need, because there's not a need to continue it. States are dropping out, so there's a very significant cost to maintaining that program. So with other states dropping out, and the majority of states have already indicated have already indicated to NABP that they don't need it past December 31st anyway.
Okay.
So Jay, the motion is on. I guess we need to make a motion that we are going to end the emergency service waiver December 31st, 2020. Is that correct?
I guess maybe I would suggest, and Clint may want to backstop me to make sure I don't mess this up. I would say that what we would be saying is that there is a motion to end item number 1 in the emergency services waiver effective December 31st, 2020. Because item 2, which is the relocation, conceivably that could still come, happen. And we do have the supplemental waiver that you issued that authorized more remote operation, which people are still using and are using well to cut down on in-person transmission risk in pharmacy. So this is a little more targeted, that we would only be ending part 1 of the emergency services waiver effective December 31st, 2020. Clint, did that seem reasonable?
It does.
All right, so is there a motion to end item number 1 on this emergency service waiver?
I'll make
moved.
that motion.
Okay, Keith, and then Bill seconded. So
Yeah.
all in favor, Andy,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Wallace,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
and I'm in favor, so it passes.
Very good. Thank you all. And I will get notice of that up today so that folks can start making any arrangements that they need to make with that. Next item on the agenda, Madam President, is a recurring item on the agenda, and that is continuing discussion of the FDA's Memorandum of Understanding. The update that I'm bringing to you all is on the pages 15 and 16 of your MOU packet. Is an article from NABP's most recent issue of Innovations magazine that describes in broad terms NABP's planned pilot project. And so to reorient everyone to this, that the MOU, which everybody's familiar with, provides that a state that agrees to participate in the MOU, that means that compounding pharmacies in that state will not be limited to shipping 5% or less of their compounded product interstate. But one of the conditions of signing on to that MOU is that the state would agree, among other things, to undertake certain data collection from compounding pharmacies in the state, and that information would then be reported to the FDA for monitoring of sort of larger scale interstate compounding operations. As we've discussed before, NABP has been given a grant from the FDA to develop a information sharing network that state boards of pharmacy could use to satisfy their obligations under the MOU. For my money, this would be a great thing if it works, because it would prevent us, if we wanted to join the MOU, from having to build out a fairly expensive data reporting system. As we've discussed before, NABP is going to pilot that, and you all have already indicated that you're interested in North Carolina participating in that pilot so that we would have an opportunity to see if it works and how it works. And if it works really well, that'd be a great piece of information for us to have in thinking about whether we sign on to the MOU. So there's a summary there of the pilot project, and report to you that on October 7th, there's a kickoff meeting between NABP staff and a handful of states that have indicated, which includes us, that have indicated their interest in participating. So I just wanted to update on that and open up for questions as we continue to think through this MOU, which we are under no, as I've said before, we're not under a gun to sign. We've got plenty of road in front of us to continue assessing this. So that's the backdrop.
So any questions or discussion on that?
One thing to remind you all of with this is, again, remember that and this a little bit of a tangent, that one of the things that's really going to help us with participation in this pilot project and potentially permanent participation is our rule requirement that all pharmacies obtain a business e-profile number, because that would allow each pharmacy in North Carolina to use that to report the compounding data that we have to collect into that network. And we're still working on it, but Missy and I have been working with NABP on the possibility that we may be able to get NABP to verify all of the business e-profile numbers that are in our system already for pharmacies, and auto assign business e-profiles to any pharmacy that doesn't have one. So we are not prepared to land that plane yet. We're still having discussions with NABP, but I feel pretty bullish that we're going to be able to get that done. That's going to make things simpler for our pharmacy permit holders during the renewal season, and would make it much easier for us to participate in the pilot project. So that's a sort of a parallel track effort going on here. Missy, did I leave anything out on that you think?
Nope. I think, yeah, no, you said it perfectly.
So Jay, do you have an update of the number of pharmacies in North Carolina that have got that profile set up with NABP?
Missy, we don't have an exact number, do we?
Yeah, I mean, NABP said that they verified, we sent our information over to them, and they said that they verified 500 of our, 3,500. But they're also working with the chains too, so they're doing directly with them. So I think we don't have an exact number as of just yet, but we are waiting on that information from them.
But if we've got 500 non-chain pharmacy business e-profiles that have already been assigned, and then you add in the chains, I think Neil or the folks at NABP thought that we might be looking at, was it Missy, roughly 500 odd business e-profiles that they thought they would need to assign at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel I feel real, if this works, look, if we can't do it this way, folks will get their business e-profiles, because when the renewal season opens, they're going to have it to be able to renew. But our hope is that if this works, when somebody logs in, and we're working out the communication end of this, but if somebody doesn't have an e-profile yet, if this works, we'll be able to notify all pharmacies in North Carolina, hey, you might not think you have a business e-profile, but you do. And the hope is that, and the plan is that we would get all of those numbers from NABP, and that we would have ThoughtSpan do some programming to hoover all those numbers into our system and populate that field for all pharmacies. So, and we would let pharmacies know, hey, you've got it. It's in there, and folks would be able to log in and renew come the stroke of midnight, November 1st.
And just to piggyback on that, I mean, when they open their pharmacy renewal for the facility, the NABP number will pop up. And so if it's already in our system, then it'll already be there. So the only question at that point might be, what is this number? But if we do some education beforehand, telling them that, it's been created for you, I think that'll alleviate a lot of problems during renewal.
Okay, thank you both for that.
And Ashley, we've made and are working with NABP to make clear that if the auto assign is going to work, we've got to know that, and it's got to be done fairly early into October, because what we don't want to do is get late into October and close to renewal season, and we've got an auto assignment going on, but then people also trying to get their own business e-profile number and coming at it from two different directions. So that I think is the potential fly in the ointment, is if we can't get the timing lined up just right. But based on discussions we had last week, I'm pretty optimistic.
Okay.
So that's it on the MOU stuff. And I'll have a much more substantive update for you all at the October 20th meeting about the pilot data project after the meeting in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thank you, Jay.
Sure. Rulemaking topics. The province of the good brother Pinion, Clint, let me hand it over to you for update on our Section 2000 amendments and the reinstatement and reapplication policy.
All righty. Well, thank y'all for indulging me in adopting the new Section 2000 hearing rule procedures. I think they will make all of our lives easier, including the lives of folks who have to come before the board, who now can see in the rules exactly what we actually do in real life. As part of the adoption of the hearing rules, we moved the reapplication and reinstatement policy into its own rule. That way, in particular, folks can know before they even get to a hearing how long they are likely to be barred as a default rule in the event that they are unsuccessful in their hearing. Because the policy has moved into the rule, there now is no longer any need for the policy, and the policy is slightly different, mainly typographically different. But it would be a good thing for y'all to repeal the now unnecessary policy.
All right. Is there any discussion or question about that? So I guess we need a vote to repeal the policy. Is that right?
And actually, yes, and as y'all are looking, the in your materials there, you have Rule 27, new Rule 2017, which has the codified policy, and then right behind that you have the old policy that we are asking to have repealed.
Anybody have any thoughts, questions on any of that? Don't see any. So is there a motion to repeal that policy? What's the policy number, Jay?
Well, it's really not a number. I say the motion would be to repeal the board's reapplication and reinstatement policy.
All right.
This is Wallace. I move to repeal the policy.
Second.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. So all in favor, Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Wallace?
Wallace, you went mute, but we saw your mouth move.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a quick trigger finger there. You know.
You and Michelle, quick on the draw.
All right. So I as well. So the motion carries.
Thank you all for that. Clint, do you want to go ahead and move into the drug preservation rulemaking, and then we'll conclude with the limited service permit discussion.
All righty. Well, as y'all know, back at the start of the plague, y'all adopted at the suggestion of the state health director an emergency rule and then a temporary rule that we call the COVID-19 drug preservation rule that effectively says for a list of restricted drugs, a prescriber has to list the reason for the prescription, and if that reason is COVID-19, it's an initial 14-day supply that can then be renewed thereafter. Because temporary rules are limited in time, this one is set to expire on March the 28th, 2021. Nobody knows what the state of the world will be in March of 2021. But in order to have a permanent rule in place to replace that and keep it going, we have to start now because the permanent rulemaking process is so long. Jay has consulted at length with Mandy Cohen and Beth Tilson, and they believe that there is a potential need for this rule to remain in place past March the 28th, and so have asked us and the Med Board and the Nursing Board, all of which have parallel restrictions, to readopt the rule as a permanent rule. They have suggested removing Tamiflu and azithromycin from the list of restricted drugs because those did not see any actual shortages as a result of COVID-19, and so there's no need to keep them on the list, but all the rest are have been the subject of shortages at various times and certainly are still the subject of possible shortages. So they have asked y'all to pass this as a permanent rule. There is no thought that it will actually be permanent, but there's no way in our rulemaking system to say we're adopting a rule that is set to vanish on X date. We just have to adopt it as a permanent rule and then repeal it when the state of emergency is over. But lest there be any bombing of Jay with countless, well, there will be that, but in an effort to reduce the number of complaints, we have proposed when we, if y'all are interested in accepting this suggestion, to say at the outset that it is our intent to repeal the rule once the state of emergency is over. So, before y'all for discussion and consideration is whether to adopt the rule as revised as a permanent rule upon the suggestion of Health and Human Services.
And I should, Clint, I said this, I think, at the beginning, maybe, but what the action today would be to publish the proposed permanent rule for notice and comment. So
Yes.
we wouldn't be enacting a permanent rule today. We would, as you are all familiar with in the process, be putting it out for notice and comment period. And you have in your materials on page 7 is the draft rule, the reason for action. And then on page 8 is the request of Secretary of Health and Human Services Mandy Cohen and State Health Director Dr. Betsy Tilson, making the request of the medical, pharmacy, and nursing boards to make all of us to make our temporary rule into a permanent rule. And Clint's exactly right. Everybody agrees that this rule shall only endure for the length of time that the public health crisis is upon us. And what we would do is at such time as that it is no longer upon us, we would move into a repeal of the rule.
And one thing I should say is that we will probably have need to have a public hearing on this, which all could or could not attend, that is separate from the January board meeting, and we may need a special board meeting to consider the rule just to make sure we stay on the schedule and don't have a gap, but we'll deal with that as we deal with it.
Quick question. Does making this temporary rule a permanent rule make it any more difficult to revise it? Let's say another drug comes out. Well, use dexamethasone, and suddenly people are hoarding dexamethasone.
Right.
And we want to add dexamethasone to that list. Does it make it any more difficult if it's a permanent rule?
That's a good question, Bill. It doesn't, because we could always have an emergency or a temporary amendment to a permanent rule just as easily as we could have one to a temporary rule.
Okay.
And we would build that. That's a terrific question. And and we would approach that from a staff perspective the same way we have throughout is if Dr. Cohen or Dr. Tilson were to notify us, we've suddenly seen the shortage, then they would notify us and we could look at, emergency amendment if we had to. But remember, this is all being based on, all of these drugs can still be used for anything that a prescriber wishes to use it for, consistent with good medical practice. It's just a way to put a little bit of a speed bump and a documentary speed bump there to preserve a supply of that drug so that patients with all sorts of different diagnoses have access to those drugs. That
Alright.
has been, by the way, one of the misunderstandings about these sorts of drugs nationally is some folks have looked at these and said, well, they're bans, and it's the exact opposite of that.
Is there any further discussion about this one? So I guess we need a vote, Jay.
Correct.
So the vote would be to bring this up
Yep.
as a public comment to make this a permanent rule.
Right. The vote would be to publish proposed rule 21 NCAC 46.1819 for notice and comment as a permanent rule.
I'll make that motion. This is Keith.
Right. For a second.
Bill.
All right. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor, Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Hill?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
I as well. So the motion carries.
Very good. Thanks, y'all. We've got great partners over at DHHS, just so you know, and also to make sure appropriate credit is being given. Amanda Fuller-Moore, who most of you know is a pharmacist over at DHHS, continues to be an invaluable resource to the board on this and every aspect of the COVID crisis. So. Last rulemaking related topic, and this is not something that staff is asking for a publish of a proposed rule yet. Wanted to talk about something conceptually, get any feedback. One, to sort of take your temperature about whether you think this is a worthwhile endeavor, and B, get any upfront feedback. And so it concerns limited service permits. I think all of us here know to greater and lesser extent there is this creature in our rules called a limited service permit. And if you read the definition of a limited service permit, it's a lot of times sort of hard to figure out exactly what a limited service permit is. And board staff have over the years adopted various ways of tracking and knowing. Of course, we know who has a limited service permit, and anybody who applies for a limited service permit, as part of the application, they have to provide a statement of why it is they're seeking a limited service permit. From time to time, board staff goes back through all of those just to make sure that we're comfortable, that we understand. Again, we know everybody that has a limited service permit. We want to be sure we're comfortable, we understand why. And specifically because, as you all know, under our inspection policy, a limited service permit is not regularly inspected unless the limited service permit performs compounding operations. And the reason for that is in a risk-based determination, limited service permits tend to be doing things on such a small and limited scope that inspecting them in response to complaints is something that we've judged adequately protects the public health and safety. But still, though, with the sort of looseness in the definition, it's a fairly labor-intensive process, both to keep track of why all pharmacies that hold a limited service permit have it. And it also tends to be confusing for applicants who become interested in a limited service permit, and it's sort of hard to explain to them what they are. So Crystal and Chase have spent a lot of time, and there's a PowerPoint. I'm not going to put up the PowerPoint and go through it, but you all have it in your materials. Crystal and Chase have done a really terrific piece of work doing a deep dive on every single limited service permit we have in the state. And you wouldn't be surprised, I think, at all to learn that the vast majority of limited service permits in this state fall into the following categories. It's an automated dispensing device, as you know, under state law and also under federal controlled substances law. You can only put an automated dispensing device at a place that has a pharmacy permit. So particularly if you're talking about putting an ADD, I know Ashley, you've got experience with this. If you're putting an ADD at a hospice facility or a long-term care facility, you have a permit for that. And we use the limited service permit for that. And I should back up and pick up. Remember that the only thing a limited service permit gets you, different from ordinary requirements, is that a pharmacist may be pharmacist manager on multiple permits if they are limited service permits. So it makes sense for an automated dispensing device. If Ashley, for example, has got 3 facilities, she's got automated dispensing devices, we can feel pretty comfortable that as the pharmacist manager for those limited services and for Relo, she can keep her eye appropriately on all of those balls and handle the pharmacist manager responsibilities. So limited service permits are a big category. Places where physician assistants or nurse practitioners do dispensing. Under our rules, NPs and PAs can dispense if they are registered with the board. They have to dispense from a formulary agreed upon by a supervising pharmacist and their prepackaged medications and the like. And they have to dispense from a place that holds a pharmacy permit. So limited service permits are very often used for those for the same reason that they're used for automated dispensing devices. Free and charitable clinics are another big component of those, because the vast majority of free and charitable clinics operate with very confined hours and off of limited formularies, and they tend to be folks in the community who go over and volunteer to do that. So it's always been a high level of comfort that a pharmacist manager on a free and charitable clinic is not going to be distracted from the pharmacist manager's responsibilities for a full service permit. Those are the big 3. Health departments also form not a huge component, but a number of those. And then there's the smattering of others. There are 5 hospitals, community hospitals in North Carolina that hold a limited service permit. And I want to give a shout out to Wallace here, who's been very helpful in discussing with staff about that, and we're continuing to do some work to figure out why those 5 hospitals and have a limited service permit. We have, for example, we found really isn't a hospital as we would think of a hospital. They have a limited service permit because they have an automated dispensing device there, but we're going to figure those out. And then there's the occasional odd limited service permits where it's 2 pharmacies under one roof, and maybe the compounding stuff is done under one permit, and the others. But those are the main ones, the main categories. What staff is interested in, and I'm chuckling, and I talked to Ashley about this a couple of weeks ago. This was something Wallace was very interested in back in 2007 and 2008, and Wallace sort of spurred staff to do some good work at his direction and getting a much better handle on who our limited service permit holders are and why. And the system that developed from that is the one we've been using, but staff sort of are interested in doing 2 things. One is bringing better clarity to what kinds of pharmacy practices would be allowed to have a limited service permit. And the definition we don't think is very useful. What we're sort of more interested in is maybe figuring out a possible rule that would just list, here are the types of pharmacies that will be eligible for a limited service permit going forward. So we want folks to know very clearly whether they're eligible for a limited service permit or whether they're not. We want you as the board to be comfortable that each of those categories are truly the types of pharmacy practices that you're comfortable, that a pharmacist manager there who's a pharmacist manager elsewhere is not being distracted or stretched too thin, I think would be the better way to put it. Stretched too thin in their overall oversight responsibilities. And there is clearly a benefit to board staff as well, that we would have high confidence of what of each of our limited service permits are, and that helps us with our inspection policies with that. So that's A. The other thing we want to bring some clarity to is pharmacist manager responsibility for these limited service permits. And that's it's more than a tad murky. It's really pretty clear if you're a pharmacist manager or overseeing PA and NP dispensing, because the PA-NP rule very clearly sets out what the requirements are. It's pretty, outside of that though, it starts to get murky. Like how many, the default rule is if you're a pharmacist manager on any permit, you have to be there half the hours the permit operates, or 32 hours per week, whichever is less. Does that really apply? Ashley, think about that. How does that apply to an automated dispensing device? You're probably not going over to the hospice in Randolph County and sitting in a folding chair beside the automated dispensing device for half the hours that it's open, nor should you. But we do think that we need to sharpen up, and this would probably need to be done by category. What are the pharmacist manager responsibilities that go with each of those types of limited service permits? So that's a heck of a mouthful, but a two-pronged project, sharpen what types of pharmacy practices are eligible for a limited service permit, with the thought that it's probably at the end of the day only going to really affect a handful of pharmacy permits, that there would probably only be a handful that currently have a service permit that might not be eligible for one going forward. And then B is that for each of those categories, making very clear what the pharmacist manager responsibilities are for that. So that's what we're working on. I mean, as a staff, we needed to go through this exercise anyway so that we could assure ourselves that there aren't any limited service permits that we're not inspecting routinely that we should be. So this was an exercise we needed to do anyway. But now that we're in it, we kind of think it might be the right time to put some sharper corners on that. So what I'm interested in is, do you all think this is a worthwhile project? And any suggestions that you think we need to be thinking about? Wallace, again, thank you, has been very helpful in talking to us with about the situations for the few hospitals that have them, and gave some very practical and important considerations to keep in mind. And Wallace, we've been following up with those hospitals and are getting really terrific feedback from the staff at those hospitals about why and how they have a limited service permit. So I feel very good that we're going to land on this in a way that some of those hospitals probably aren't going to have a limited service permit going forward because they're not, in one case, they're not really a hospital, and a couple of others are going to be like, oh, we didn't really know we had a limited service permit. But for those that really need it, I think we're going to be able to work it out so they continue to have them. So, all right, I'll stop. That's very blue sky kind of stuff, but that's what we're working on.
Well, I just want to say that the pharmacy I owned had, and they continue to have, a limited service permit, and it serves a very useful need. And I really don't think there's an issue with the ability to supervise both operations.
Bill, just for clarity, yours was a situation where there is one pharmacy, right, that has two permits within the pharmacy, and the limited service permits use compounding stuff, right?
That's right. The for lack of a better description, the front of the building was used for compounding operations, and the back of the building was used for hospice and nursing home. And as that business morphed, we changed the scope of practice to an infusion type operation. And primarily what that does is it allows access to drugs that are needed for compounding that would not ordinarily be available without the wholesaler relationships that come with the scope of practice or scope of service that's associated with an LSP. So it gets pretty convoluted.
Yeah, it's fairly mysterious to me, Bill. I was going to say this is I might I don't want to volunteer Chase unnecessarily. I might like to get Chase to follow up with you if you're willing on this to help us understand how those relationships work, because I know there are a handful of those.
Yeah, and an email. She emailed the PIC already and asked for that information.
Good.
So there's queries that are going out, and
Chase, as usual, is 10 steps ahead of me.
Yeah, just what I just said is exactly what the PIC told her, because he had to come to me to get the background.
Right.
And anyway, there may be some pretty obscure reasons that are not readily apparent. So I don't want us to be too hasty in changing rules that may have consequences that are unintended.
Agree with you fully, Bill. That's exactly why we want this sort of feedback, and why we're out gathering that feedback. It's certainly, be assured that it's not a case if staff doesn't, if somebody has a limited service permit and we're not sure the why, we're not making any assumptions about whether they should or they shouldn't. We're engaging in exactly this discussion.
Well, I know when I owned the place and was the PIC, I was frequently asked, seemed like it might have even been annually, why do you have a limited service permit? What do you do? What's the need for it? I think these questions have been asked on a number of occasions, but I don't have real good recollection on that.
Hey, Jay.
Yep, go ahead, Al.
Just a little bit of the data. It looks like 4 of the limited service permits were those that were within an existing full service permit. So, and 3 of those were compounding labs, as Bill described.
Okay.
And one of them was long-term care that was in fact compounding as well.
Got it. Good.
Can I ask another question? Anytime there's like a Pyxis machine, is that considered an automated dispensing system?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't remember exactly what the number is, Bill, but I think it's something over 100 limited service permits of our census are automated dispensing, right? Whether that be Omnicell, Pyxis, whatever the particular technology happens to be.
Yeah, it was like 132.
Right.
So a hospital, the 8 hospital LSPs could be hospitals with part-time pharmacy departments. That doesn't necessarily mean that those 8 hospitals have Pyxis or Omnicells, because then it'd be classified as an automated dispensing system.
Right. That's part of what we're trying to figure out, Bill. And actually, we know now that the number is 5. We've narrowed it down. That's actually just 5. And that's what we're doing. We're having individual conversations with each of those 5 hospitals, and the circumstances are very different at each of those. There's not a uniform sort of fact pattern, as it were. One is one that we know it's sort of a shared services between 2 pharmacies. I wouldn't say it's part-time necessarily. It's really more just a shared services arrangement. I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, because that's what we're trying to figure out. One was a hospital that was really not a hospital like we would think of it. Well, I shouldn't say that. A full service hospital. It was almost essentially like a little emergency, standalone emergency room with an automated dispensing device. So that really fits under the ADD. And that's another part of what we're trying to do, Bill, is because the definition is so unclear sometimes. When folks tell us why they're a limited service permit, sometimes they're almost like throwing a dart. They sort of know they fit there, but it's hard for us to track, because they're not pinging a radio button that says, well, we're a limited service permit because of X. So that's part of what we're trying to do. There was one hospital we talked to that had a limited service permit, and I don't want to say which one it is. I don't want to get the PM in any trouble with anybody, but the PM said No, 15 years ago, it made sense that we were a limited service permit, but now, the hospital has grown and we're not really operating as a limited service permit. So some of these are going to go away just because
Right.
they've grown, they've had success, which
Right.
to their credit.
I just,
Thank
Jay and I had, this Wallace, Jay and I just had, long conversation about things and, about these. And I guess a lot of my, comments I made to him was, I think there is still a place for limited service permits for hospitals that are small, that are, that are trying to operate in very rural areas. And I know that whether they have a full service permit or not is not going to close the doors, but they're fighting a lot of stuff right now, especially trying to keep hospital inpatient kind of healthcare in small rural communities. And, I just encourage Jay to try to be, that we need to be really careful to think about trying to regulate from what is needed to protect the public versus just picking some arbitrary numbers and things like that about, that kind of stuff. And because I really think under Joint Commission standards and whatever that applies to hospitals, then, there's a lot of built-in kind of things. So anyway, I think there's still a place. And I hope, as somebody that's lived in a rural area all my life, I hope that healthcare can find its way to be able to somehow move back to not this consolidating into bigger, like I know I'm on a soapbox now, but into bigger, these big hospital operations that people have to travel so long to get, to inpatient or emergency room services. Think about Belhaven and, just that's the most acute one to me is, that community, people that live in Stumpy Point, literally it's probably an hour. If they have a heart attack in Stumpy Point, it's going to be an hour and a half at least, probably, before they can even get to some kind of care. So,
Is that a real place?
That's a real place.
Okay, that's not an acronym.
Not to be confused with Lizard Lick.
No, it's Stumpy Point is a real place right down on the corner, western part of the Pamlico Sound, about as far off as you. I mean, when you leave Stumpy Point, you're sort of you're going off the edge. It's so.
Here there be monsters on the map.
The LSPs that give me cause for concern are the ones issued to PA nurse practitioner groups. And I do not believe that those LSPs are following the letter of the law with regard to prepacking, et cetera, et cetera. And so maybe we should have further discussion at some point about exactly what's required there and then make sure it's being done.
Yeah, Bill, with respect to those LSPs particularly, that's where we've also gotten into folks professing some confusion about what the PM's responsibilities are for those types of permits. It shouldn't be, because that is the one area in which I think our rules make crystal clear what they are. But yes, Bill, your implementation point is part and parcel of the question that we want to be sure we're confident on, which is what are the PM's responsibilities and how are we going to monitor those? That absolutely factors in.
Yeah, I have firsthand experience with a number of those.
Right. That's very helpful, Bill. This is where, and going back to what Wallace said, Wallace's discussion with me and Crystal and Chase on these rural hospital areas allowed us and is allowing us to have conversations with those few hospitals that we're able to ask better questions and understand the answers in a much better way, because Wallace has helped us frame out what the landscape is on those. And Bill, your input here will be very helpful for these contexts you're raising as well. Let me ask you this. I don't sense this, but to be sure I could, does anybody think this is just not worth the candle?
I think this is, in a pharmacy setting, I would call this quality assurance or performance improvement. So from that spirit, I would say it's worth it.
I think that's a very accurate way to capture it, Bill. So we're not trying to completely reinvent the wheel. What we're trying to do is make sure that we've defined the wheel appropriately, and we're able to make sure that if it starts going flat, we have a way of knowing that and changing it.
It's one of those situations where you may not know there's a problem until you start looking.
And I want to tell you what, nobody can analyze data and get to the root of things like Chase can. So we've got the right person gathering all that data for us. Well, Ashley, what I will take from this is the very good feedback about things to consider with some of these categories, and we'll continue along with this process with an aim to update you at the October meeting, either with an actual proposal or just a sort of let you know where we are down the path. We're not under any particular deadline to do this, obviously, other than one we set for ourselves, but would like to get something concrete in front of you before the holidays for sure. Whether that's October or November, I don't know, but we'll keep on keeping on if that's all right with y'all.
That sounds great.
Sounds good.
And
Very helpful.
I'm sure that Wallace and I would both be happy to serve on a temporary subcommittee if needed.
Yeah, let me ask Ashley. Let me ask you as the president then. Would you all be comfortable with, as staff completes its investigative work and sort of frames this up a little better? Ashley, what are your thoughts about maybe going ahead and appointing Bill and Wallace as a limited service permit committee, and we could work with them so that before we bring a proposal to the entire board, we've gotten the benefit of their input and sharpening?
I think that's a great idea.
And we don't need a motion on that. That's your prerogative as president to make that appointment. So Bill, be careful what you ask for there, brother.
Yep, you're right.
But we'll Bill and Wallace, as we get done with the interviews we're conducting and get things sharpened up, we'll have a check-in with you all in a few weeks before the October meeting to say here's where we are and get some further guidance from you. I appreciate the offer. Yep.
Sounds good.
Thank you both.
Thanks, Bill. I'm glad to work with you and do that.
And thank Wallace and Bill for your willingness to help out.
Well, I volunteered Wallace, so you might make sure he's willing.
I think
that's what I said. I appreciate you you bringing it up, because I do think that.
Okay,
I think
so you didn't
it would make
mean
for
that.
a better process, a better flow if we can get it, to the point that we, can massage it a little bit before it actually gets for the whole board consideration. I think it's probably a better process.
Completely agree. All right, thanks, y'all.
May I ask for a 5-minute break so I can warm up my coffee and plug in my power cord?
Warm up your coffee. Is that what the kids are calling it these days, Bill?
Literally. But I need to plug in too, so the computer doesn't go kaput.
Ashley, you want to say maybe so everybody can have attend to biological needs, and otherwise maybe say break down and reconvene at 11:30. Would that work?
That works for me. If that's good with everybody else.
Okay, let's come back on in 13 minutes.
Based on some rough calculations.
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello. Can you hear me?
Mr. Herring,
Yes.
hey, the members are on a break.
Okay.
They're going to reconvene at 11:30.
Clint, I got your email. I'll take a look at the calendar on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you. We don't want to cut the margin that thin. in
Yeah, you
January.
don't screw around in January because bad
Right.
things can happen.
But it should be easy enough to find a date in the last half of December. Maybe everybody will be in the holiday spirit, Clint.
We'll schedule a public meeting on Christmas Eve and the special board meeting on Christmas.
Ashley, I just sent you an email with an apology.
I'm responding back. I take that as a compliment, so no need to apologize.
As always, you were gracious in your reaction to my many faux pas. Okay, thank you. Ashley, how are your kids doing with the online school as well as anybody?
Not good. We the board voted last night, so hopefully we'll get some answers. Hopefully they'll do the 8A B-Day thing. My son does RCC or community college classes and high school, so he's doing pretty well. But my daughter, who's 14, needs to be in school at some level. So hopefully she will go back next week.
Antoine's boys are here at the office today, logged in. I went stuck my head in and said, "You boys enjoying online school?"
Yeah, it's been something else.
When we were out west camping, there were families that were having class in their camper in the parking lot at Yellowstone National Park.
Well, it's a great time for families to travel, you know.
Actually, they were at Mount Rushmore, wasn't Yellowstone, but anyway.
Hey, Bill, on that line, I've been looking at teardrop campers. And I raised it with Amy, and she didn't react violently to the negative, which I'll take as, but I might talk to you. So I don't know if you've ever looked into those specifically, but there's some pretty neat options on those.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to consider. I don't care what you buy, Jay. There's trade-offs.
Yeah.
You know, and but yeah, I can certainly give you some things to think about that you might not. You know, you need to develop a checklist.
Yeah.
What you got to have and what you can live without.
Right. And the big thing with those teardrop campers, as you know, teardrop camper, you're not going to get a toilet facility, and you're not, you got to be getting one of those with the thought that you're going to be someplace where you have access to toilet facilities and showers and the like. It's not one-stop shopping with those.
The most beautiful camping are places where you don't have facilities.
Right. Well, not developed facilities anyway. I do have one of those trowel things that you can use. Which would be fine with me. I don't think Amy would be enjoying or would be joining me on any trip in which I handed her the trowel and said, "Good luck out there."
If you got a mason jar, you got a bathroom.
We'll talk about that on the checklist, Bill, offline.
Hey, Ashley.
Yes.
Wallace. It's interesting. For Perquimans, they started day one of school with the choice thing, you know, with online or a virtual thing if parents wanted it. But basically, all the kids are back in school. They've been in since the beginning of school. So
well, there's a big mental thing going on there, and that's what my kids need is the socialization and just being with their friends.
Well, I was proud of the school board for taking the stand to go ahead and try to open up and get things in place. And
yeah. Well, Jay, it's 11:33. Should we start back?
And there's Michelle. She's good. And I have a request from the staff. Ashley, are you okay with flipping and doing the investigative report and then going to financial?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Ellen.
All right.
why don't you take over?
All right. So I'm going to start. Joshie, are you on to do the stats?
I am, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and do the enforcement specialist announcement, and then I will hand it over to you, brother. Does that sound good?
Sure, that's fine.
All right. Everybody, I'm excited to make some announcements about some staffing innovations or changes we've got going on in the enforcement department. We have created a new hybrid role, and we've established 2 of them. And so these folks will not only do investigative functions, they've got administrative stuff that they do, and they will be responsible for some training as well. So as you all are aware, Warren resigned at the end of May, so kind of at the beginning of COVID, and what still continues on is looking like an endless process. And so we were kind of given the opportunity to rethink how the department is set up. And so we had annual evals around the same time as well. So got lots of feedback from staff and input about what COVID has done to their roles and all these things. And so with great feedback from the staff, made the decision to create this hybrid role. And I am pleased to announce that Loretta Weisner and Cindy Parham have agreed to fill these new hybrid roles. And so it is exciting times. Cindy is her investigative piece will be responsible for the Central District, which was Warren's investigative territory. And Loretta will continue as she has been as the floater. She is now an enforcement specialist, and we can let that term die. She will be responsible for all the investigative pieces that involve out-of-state pharmacies and out-of-state pharmacists and permit applications for the out-of-state pharmacies. So that is kind of how we are shape-shifting and innovating here in the enforcement department in the time of COVID. Always looking for the silver lining. So that's our bit of excitement to announce for today. But any questions from anyone about the new hybrid roles?
And I want to also compliment Ellen, not only for the substance of what she did, but she's accomplished 2 things at one time. Is A, providing a position that gives more opportunity for advancement and building of new skills. And this also means we never had an opening per se. Since we're not adding an FTE, this allows us to cover that inspection or investigation territory and add other things, all at about 25% of the budget impact that we would have had if we'd hired back in another FTE. So it's always good to be conscious of the budget, and what Ellen and her folks have done is another example of folks being sensitive to that and looking for ways to improve our efficiency so we keep having a healthy bottom line. So Ellen, thank you and your team for that aspect of it as well.
Thank you all. Any other questions? All right, y'all, I've got to sign off, but have a wonderful day. It's so great to see everybody's beautiful face.
Good to see you too, Ellen.
Yeah. Bye.
Be well.
JK, take us the rest of the way, man.
All righty. Good morning, everybody. So if you'll, I guess, look behind your tab, you'll see the investigative stats. So case-wise, from the beginning of 2020 up through September 11, we are at a total of 241 cases, a little lower than what we normally are, but given the circumstances, you can understand why. As far as breaking down the cases, the AOC charge cases continue to lead. Technicians and pharmacists, even during this time, are, still ready, willing, and able to, get charges. Next comes the procedural legal category with 62, and we do have some error cases at 42, followed up by the inspection follow-ups at 38. Diversions are at 20. And substance abuse cases are at 6. And incident reports are at 4. And then the category for other, we have 3 of those. And if you look under the investigative case categories, we did break out what these 3 other cases are. And one involved a complaint by a disgruntled employee alleging COVID contamination at a pharmacy, but that could not be substantiated when we looked into it. The second one was a technician renewal application where the tech was charged with embezzlement but did not provide appropriate documentation. And then last, a pharmacist failing to obtain the required amount of continuing education hours for renewal. Any questions on those before I move to the surrenders? All right. So again, same time frame for the surrenders, beginning of the year through September 11. Technicians are leading the way at 19. We're still at 4 for the pharmacists, and 1 nurse practitioner, 1 DME business, and then 1 clinical pharmacist practitioner. And just want to reiterate what Ellen said about the new positions for enforcement specialists. Loretta and Cindy, couldn't have been better choices for that. And I know they will be great at it and they will excel in those roles. So any questions about stats or anything? All righty.
That was good. JK, thank you, brother.
Thank you,
Yes,
Joe.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to back up now, Ashley, and pick up the financial report and let JP share that with us.
Yeah, I'm here. I hope you guys can hear me all right.
You're coming in loud and clear.
All right.
Everybody noticed JP's fabulous mustache that he's been growing here in the time of COVID.
Can we take a vote on that?
I'd probably prefer you not. But, Jay is the only one besides my girlfriend, I think, that has seen me throughout this pandemic. So he gets my buddy cop movie.
I'm not sure where you're going with that comparison, but that's. But I am very fond of you, JP. So
thanks. So July financials, I'm going to kind of gloss over. That was the start of our fiscal year. Oftentimes what we see there are sort of large budgeting differences, usually favorable variances, because what's happening is we've budgeted for some large expenses during the year, but due to timing, those haven't happened yet. So we see them budgeted for at the beginning of a fiscal year. It could take several months for those to sort of fill in. So it's usually a favorable variance. But then on the flip side, what we also see is we have essentially 3 months before we see our uptick in revenues for the year, right, with the start of renewal season. So we're kind of operating in the red, but then at the same time, we're not spending as much as our budget has sort of allotted. So anyhow, August, I think, is a more clear picture of sort of the start of our fiscal year. And again, from a big picture point of view, we're seeing what we expected with the pandemic still being here and activities being restricted, especially investigations and inspections. We're just not having the operating expenditures that we've budgeted for. We, as you all know, had conservatively budgeted for a sort of a downturn in revenues. And as in every year, we always conservatively budget for revenues. And we're again seeing a sort of surprise of favorable variances in that. So if you looked on the income statement for the month, you'll see that some surprising, pharmacy reciprocity, there's a more than expected there. Pharmacy permits, more than expected. Device and DME permits, more than expected. And again, we're also seeing some unexpected miscellaneous income, which, as you may or may not know, is primarily our mailing list that people request, and that's public information that we provide at a cheap cost to them. So we're still seeing that coming in. So overall, big picture, we had favorable variances for revenues. We still haven't spent a lot of money operating expense wise, or not the money that we expected anyway. And as Jay pointed out, the investigation inspections department, with their decisions on headcount and the way they've sort of reconfigured things to make that department more efficient, we're seeing, even though we had budgeted for certain personnel costs, those costs are coming in under budget, which that should carry out throughout the year unless there's a change there. So that's pretty much it where we stand in this fiscal year. If there's any questions or concerns, I'm always happy to delve in and do line detail explanations or whatever. I can also follow up with emails. Any information you all need, please reach out if you have questions. If there are none, then I'll just give a brief update. We did have our annual financial audit that was
JP, I think Bill, hang on, JP, I think Bill had a question.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
remind me again, the fiscal year runs July to June?
Correct. Yeah, we made that change in 2019. We've now switched to the state government calendar year. So July 1 through June 30th.
Thank you.
So in the agenda, you'll see we did have our annual financial audit. That has moved up a little bit since our fiscal year end used to be 9:30 and now it's 6:30. We've obviously moved that up. Our auditors, Bernard Robinson, were absolutely outstanding. They obviously did remote field work due to the pandemic, and I was able to fulfill all the requests digitally and electronically, thanks to Antoine and everybody for helping me have the capabilities to do that. There have been no audit adjustments so far, which is always an excellent sign. That what that means is the information that I provided to you all year is what the auditors have deemed appropriate as well. That said, I'll give myself the out by saying we won't have the audited financial reports until next month at that board meeting, and our auditors will present that as they usually do. But we're not expecting any sort of errors or changes or adjustments or anything like that. It's been all good news from their end. So that's all I've got, unless again there's questions, concerns, comments.
JP, obviously, well done to you and to Rhonda for the audit process that did go as smoothly as it always has. Thank you very much for that. And board members, like JP said, we will have the auditors at the October meeting who will present you with the audit report for your review and approval. And we'll have that in time. That'll give us time then, once that's approved, to incorporate that into the annual report that's due to various state agencies by the end of October. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
Thank you, JP.
And let me just, Ashley, if it's okay with you, let me just pause on the annual report thing for a moment, since that was a sort of a natural segue. You all know that we are required by statute to file an annual report each year by October 31st. The statute sets forth exactly what that that annual report must contain. It's a lot of data about our census and that sort of thing, which staff assembles and plugs in. And I included in your materials last year's annual report just to remind you of what it looks like. So the numbers are the numbers, and we'll run those and plug them in. But another part of the annual report is it's an opportunity to report to various other state agencies. Hey, here's what we've been doing. Here, what are our big projects and accomplishments over the years. So I always make sure I update. For example, we'll update that Michelle and Wallace joined the board this year, and we'll talk about folks who concluded their board service, that kind of thing. And I always maintain a running list of the sort of the big things we've done over the year to include in the report. But do take a look, and if there's anything or if there's anything you want me to be sure that I get in the annual report, let me know what that is and I'll get it in. And what I will do is I'll have a draft of the annual report for your review at the October 20th meeting. And if it meets with your approval, I'll get it filed the next week. But I want to make sure if there's something that you especially want us to emphasize in that report that I do it. All right. Somebody's ringing. Board member election update. Just to let everybody, just a reminder, we do have our Southeastern District board member election that will run from November 1st through March 1st, 2021 during the renewal season. You all know that's Andy's seat, and Andy is eligible to run for a second 5-year term, and I understand will be running for a second 5-year term. Andy, don't forget to send us your petition.
I'm having a hard time finding 10 people that would sign a petition for me, so I'll try to get that for you.
Boy, your polling numbers not looking too good there, then, are they? That's right. But just a reminder, everybody knows what the Southeastern District is, and a reminder that every pharmacist who resides in the state of North Carolina when the election starts is eligible to vote in the election, not just pharmacists who reside in the Southeastern District. Kristen has been doing her usual outstanding work, getting everything ready to go. She has been the liaison with folks who are interested in running and those who have filed to run. And I'm not being cloak and dagger. We have folks that have filed to run, but the deadline's not here, and I don't want to talk about candidates before the deadline has arrived and anybody think that I'm promoting some candidates over others. But we're certainly going to have a contested election. There's high interest in the seat, as there always is with our board member elections. Kristen and I hosted a virtual Q&A session last Wednesday. And we had, Kristen, I think it was probably 6 or 7 people who were on that. I thought it went well. Michelle, the PowerPoint I used will look very familiar to you. It was the same PowerPoint we used when you came in and met everybody, but walk through what board service is, what board service is not, what the time commitments are, and what the processes for the election are. And I think it was very well received. So we are 15 odd days out from the deadline. So at the October meeting, we'll certainly be reporting to you all. Here are the candidates for that seat, and voting will open on November 1st. So Kristen, again, deserves every single shred of credit for how smoothly and efficiently these elections run. Any questions on that? Ashley, this is I was your prerogative as president to appoint. We have I skipped NABP District 3 virtual meeting recap. I really have. Thanks, Michelle. I know you were on that meeting. Ashley, I know you were on that call. And if I've left out somebody, I apologize. I was spinning a lot of plates during that thing. But we had the NABP virtual meeting. It was as unsatisfying as those types of virtual meetings tend to be. We got the business done that we needed to get done. Specific credit to Cindy Parham, who you all know serves as NABP District 3 Secretary Treasurer. She really runs NABP District 3. She did terrific work, as always, getting helping us turn on a dime and get a virtual meeting scheduled and operated and providing the right reports. We did not have, because Jeff Maceros was just elected to a 3-year term on the NABP's executive committee from District 3, we did not have an election issue. So we went through the business. I guess it was probably Michelle and Ashley, about an hour and a half, 2 hours, I think, was the length of the meeting. And there were no resolutions that came out of District 3, and we got our resolutions committee folks. So it was what it was. We touched the bases we needed to touch. And just a reminder, and Bill knows this really well now from his reservations stuff, that the District 3 meeting will return to Hilton Head, South Carolina, to the Sonesta Resort next August of 2021. And Tracy Collier, who is a Campbell University College of Pharmacy graduate and the executive director of the South Carolina Board of Pharmacy, continues to go far above and beyond the call of duty by agreeing to once again step up and have them host. So let's all cross our fingers and hope next August we'll be on the beach at Hilton Head discussing resolutions or not. And then, Ashley, now to get back to what I was at, designation of a board member. NABP holds interactive fora. I know some of you have attended these before. There's an interactive executive officer meeting, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. That one's going to be virtual. But there is an interactive board member forum that is scheduled for January 26th and 27th. It will be at NABP headquarters if we're able to do it live. And so, Ashley, I need to designate who from our board is going to attend as soon as we have that. So I wanted to throw that open for y'all to talk about that.
Is there
Who's
anyone
dying to go to Chicago in late January? It is lovely up there that time of year.
Is there anyone interested in going to that?
I will give a plug. These interactive forums, NABP always gets its highest or best, I should say, evaluations of meetings from these. There is an agenda, but much of the agenda are discussion fora and the like. So it's a good opportunity to meet your peers in other states and see how similar our challenges are on things. So they're good meetings if you're able to attend.
I've been to 2 of them, so I definitely need to be taking a back door to other members, and they are worthwhile.
I'm happy to go, Jay. I think that, I don't know when the latest you need to know. I mean, I think there is some concern about travel. So that would probably be my biggest hesitation.
Totally understand, Ashley. I tell you what I could do. Why don't I go ahead and submit you as the attendee? And if we need to make a change later on, that's usually not a problem. What they want to know is, which states are going to send someone. So if it's the will of the board, Ashley, or more to the point, I guess, the will of you as the president who makes this appointment, I could submit your name. And then if something comes up, we've got plenty of time to change gears if we need to.
Yeah, I think that would be great. We don't know what the next few months is going to hold anyway, so
yeah,
I'm happy to do it.
Okay. So it will be submitted.
Unless there's anyone else that would like to go. Anyone else?
I like your decisiveness, Madam President.
I'll be glad to be the backup, Ashley. I would love to attend, but it's just a challenge for me at that time of the year with classes and so forth. But I could figure out a way to navigate it if necessary.
Okay, thank you,
Andy. I'll keep a note of that, and if we need to change it up, you and I will get together. We'll figure that out.
Okay.
Ellie's reports to the board, unless there's someone from one of the schools online who wishes to make a report. Now I'll pause on that. I'm looking at our attendees just to see. Let me just give me a moment here and see if there's anybody who wants to.
I think it'd be nice to hear from Loretta, except she's asleep.
Loretta Wisner?
Loretta's the picture of the dog.
Oh.
I was going to ask, are we going to do another test run? I mean, I guess we don't need to with the doggies. That was pretty fun.
You know what? I will bring Thomas on October 20th and have him make an appearance. Well, I'm not seeing anything, so I think that leaves us. We do have a need. Listen, I'm not showing anything. We did not have pre-hearing conferences this time. We didn't have anybody teed up. Oh, that reminds me, Keith. Let me ask you. I sent this out yesterday. Since we didn't have any pre-hearings this month, but we know we are going to have some next month. Are you okay with being bumped up to be the pre-hearing officer on October 19th?
Be glad to.
And Michelle would like to start observing pre-hearing conferences, and so I've slotted her in to participate too as an observer. Thank you for that, Keith. I probably should have asked before I did that, but you could always tell me to rethink my plan there.
I'm glad to do it.
Thank you, brother. And CPP candidates, I know Mr. Mixon has been Johnny on the spot, even as he was traveling across country with keeping up with the CPP candidates. So I think we're all set and don't really have any consent stuff that we need to approve.
Now, Jay, along those lines, wasn't somebody else going to start joining in the process?
I think you would agree to stay on, so that's how we're proceeding.
I'm happy to do it.
Every time you think you're out, Bill, we pull you back in.
No, I'm not trying to get out of something.
I know that. So then that leaves, then we do have matters for closed session. There would be two matters. One is possible summary suspensions, and the other is attorney-client advice on a potential litigation matter. But before we go to that, let's pause to make sure there's nothing else that we need to discuss in open session, because when we go into closed session, Antoine is going to exit non-board member and critical staff attendees. So once we go into closed session, when we come back in, the only thing we can come back in to do is adjourn. So I wanted to make sure there was nothing else we needed to. I don't have anything, but just wanted to make sure.
I just wanted to make sure back to the pre-conference hearing, pre-hearing conferences.
Easy for us to say, Michelle.
Is it okay? I know I would like to get as much experience as possible with them. So is it okay if I attend the others as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And so what we'll do is, Michelle, you'll attend each and every one we have in October, and then you can keep attending those as long as you want to observe. But I think you're probably going to find after the ones in October, my guess is you're going to be completely comfortable with the process at that point.
Michelle, can I add something? I was mortified as well, but Clint and Jay make it so just seamless. I think that if you see kind of how it goes, I think you'll feel much more confident. Okay. And they make everything so much better. So I don't think that, I went into it, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do this, but the two of them make it really seamless. So I think once you watch Keith, and I know he does a great job, you'll be ready to go.
He does a great job at pre-hearing conference. But it's your call, Michelle. I thank you for the compliment, Ashley. But I think that's more of a product of y'all's smarts and diligence than anything else. But Michelle, yeah, I agree with what Ashley said about comfort, but completely your call. We will, you can participate as an observer as many times as you'd like to, no problem at all.
And also, Michelle, thank you for attending the High Point University. That thing, whatever that, all that stuff is.
Virtual accreditation visit.
There you go, because that's a very time-consuming process. So thank you for stepping up and doing that. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
And I know that ACP got all those various forms they require you to fill out, Michelle.
Good.
Did you feel like you were signing up to take out a mortgage by the time you got done with? Very good. Well, so nothing else I'm seeing. I think. Madam President, we could entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Hey,
I'll make a motion, Mrs. Keith.
Motion by Keith, second by Andy. All in favor? Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
And Ashley is an aye. We'll go into closed session.
And let's pause now while Antoine clears the board, and we'll wait until he tells us that the board has been cleared, and then we'll move into the closed session matters.
When we go back to live meetings, we need Antoine to escort everybody out for closed session.
He can be our sergeant at arms.
That's right.
Bailiff, whatever. Who were you whispering to, Ashley?
My student. I told her she had to get out.
Sorry, we do have a, I'm letting her back in. We do have a student as well here. It's so see if I just let you back in. She's rotating here, so we'll let her in. Yeah. No, that's fine. I just let her back in.
Okay.
You wouldn't have any way to know that.
We were when we were on the topic of pharmacy schools, just FYI, cohorts of students this fall were smaller, like you would expect. It was at Campbell and schools around the country. As it fits the narrative that people talk about a lot out there, that there's too many schools of pharmacy based on the current trends, I would point you to research a little bit what's happening at Hampton University. So do some reading there. They're having some struggles there. I think right now they're in the phase out of their program. There is some litigation, as I understand it, but that is the first of what could be many colleges of pharmacy around the country deciding to move in a different direction with those programs. So I know you hear that narrative out there a lot of we've got too many schools, just keep up with it, read about it. It's out there for public consumption, but Hampton is one that's in a difficult situation right now.
And where are they?
Virginia, Hampton, Virginia.
Hampton, Virginia.
All right, Jay.
All clear, Antoine?
Everything's all clear, just board staff.
Thank you, sir. Clint, why don't we start with you on the attorney-client potential litigation matter?